Hey guys, tonight we're going to a place you've probably never heard of, and yet, at one time, it was one of the largest cities on Earth. Not in China. Not in Europe. Right in the middle of what's now the US Midwest. No skyscrapers, no castles, but towering mounds of earth, built basket by basket. Welcome to Cahokia. You're standing at the edge of a river, wide, brown, slow. The Mississippi murmurs in the dark, its banks soft and silted beneath your feet. Fireflies pulse above the wet grass like drifting stars. The air is thick, almost syrupy, and the rustle in the trees might be wind, or something older. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking toward a place that barely appears on modern maps. No neon signs, no billboards, not even paved roads. Just a rise in the land, a kind of earthen staircase that disappears into mist. But back around the year 1050, this area was a living, breathing city, pulsing with ritual, trade, cooking smoke, and drumbeats. The forest opens like a curtain. You step onto a packed dirt trail. The path is worn smooth from 1,000 bare feet. Somewhere ahead, a child laughs, a sound oddly timeless. Cahokia is close. But not the Cahokia you might know from the park signs or dry history exhibits. The real one. The one that smelled of roasted corn and river clay, where frogs croaked in sacred ponds, and people whispered prayers to sky gods as they slept beneath the stars. It's hard to picture today, but this place once held as many as 40,000 people. That's bigger than London at the time. Bigger than Paris. It was a magnet. People came from hundreds of miles away, not just to live here but to be changed by it. Some never left. And you? You're arriving just as the fog lifts. A canoe glides silently to shore. You can almost hear the paddle dipping through water. The man at the helm wears nothing but a woven skirt and necklace of bones. Behind him, bundles of goods. Maybe bear fat, maybe bundles of dried squash seeds. Trade. Always trade. The city appears in fragments. First the mound. Not a little hill, a towering pyramid of packed earth, flat on top like a stepped cake. A thin trail winds up the side, so steep you'll want to catch your breath halfway. This is Monk's Mound, and even now, after 1,000 years, it's the biggest earthwork north of Mexico. It took centuries to build. Basket by basket. Tens of millions of baskets, each loaded with dirt, passed hand to hand, shoulder to shoulder. There were no beasts of burden, no wheels. Just human will. Historians still argue whether this was purely for ritual, or also for sheer visibility. But from the top, you can see everything. The plazas below, the timber posts of Woodhenge in the distance, the low smoke curling from countless thatched rooftops. It's not quite a grid, but it's not chaos either. There's a kind of pattern here, something cosmic. At your feet, someone's left a handful of maize kernels. A quiet offering. You don't touch them. The city murmurs. Not with car horns or electric buzzes, but with the soft percussion of daily life. Pestles against stone. Babies gurgling. Someone tuning a flute. And yet, something feels vaguely theatrical. As if Cahokia isn't just a city, but a performance. People move in ways that seem intentional, almost choreographed. Even the way women carry clay pots, balanced perfectly on hips, has rhythm. That might be part of the point. Cahokia, for all its earthly grit, is also a stage. A place where the sky and the ground talk to each other. Where the layout itself mirrors constellations. Where mounds aren't just land, they're ladders to the gods. Of course, not everything is mystical. A group of boys splashes in a muddy pond. One of them shrieks as a frog leaps into his tunic. You smile. Turns out ancient cities had pranksters too. You wander past a field where women are bent over, planting maize. They move with practiced ease. The soil here is dark and fertile. It must have seemed like magic to early settlers, land that feeds you back when treated kindly. And Cahokia had a lot of mouths to feed. Still, questions rise like steam. How did this city get so big so fast? Was it political brilliance? A surge in agriculture? Or something more elusive, like shared spiritual ecstasy? No one agrees. But for now you're here, breathing in the humid air, listening to the wind stir cattails along the shore, watching as the past starts to unfold, one earthy mound at a time. You descend from the great mound, legs a little shaky, and your feet touch the flattened earth of Cahokia's grand plaza. It's not paved. It's tamped down as if generations of bare saws have pressed it smooth. The sheer size of the space is astonishing, over 50 acres of open land right in the heart of the city. You look around and imagine the same vast plaza filled with dancing bodies, chanting priests, and watchers gathered in reverent silence. This isn't a backwater. It's a city with a plan. You stroll slowly through the city's core, careful not to trip over an exposed tree root or the occasional chicken that seems to think it owns the place. The air carries the scent of burnt wood and dried cornmeal. In the distance you see more mounds, some tall and rectangular, others low and rounded like sleeping bison. All are deliberate. None are accidental. The layout is geometric in a way that suggests both function and faith. You pass rows of houses built in clusters, each made from woven mats, thatched reeds and plastered earth. They lean into each other like gossiping neighbors. Some have fences, others little gardens or drying racks covered in fish. This isn't just a ceremonial hub, it's a living city. And by population, it rivaled anything in Europe at the time. While London was fumbling through the early medieval era with a population of 20 or 30,000, Cahokia was hosting tens of thousands more, without castles, without cobbled streets, and without a single suit of armor. You pass a group of kids kicking around something that looks suspiciously like a pig bladder. They scatter like sparrows when a stern-faced elder walks by, a bundle of reeds balanced on her shoulder. She barely glances at you, though you're obviously out of place. But maybe not too out of place. In a city like this, filled with travelers from every edge of the continent, you're just one more visitor on an ordinary day. Someone once described Cahokia as a prehistoric Manhattan, but that feels wrong. Too angular, too shiny. This is more like a breathing tapestry, woven, frayed, mended again. You reach a neighborhood near a narrow stream, and the houses grow tighter, the air a little smokier. Families cook together, laugh together. You overhear a debate in a language you don't recognize, perhaps Illinois, or maybe a dialect already lost to time. They're arguing over how many spirits live in the river. As twilight deepens, soft drums begin to thrum in the background. Not loud. Just enough to make the ground feel like it has a heartbeat. And then, off in the distance you spot something both strange and strangely familiar. Scaffolding. A new mound under construction. You wander closer, careful not to get in the way. Dozens of workers, young, old, male, female, form a line. Each one carries a basket full of soil up a ramp and dumps it carefully in place. They chat, whistle, occasionally sing. There's no whip-cracking overseer here, no forced labor as far as you can tell. It's work, sure, but it feels communal. Sacred even. The mound rises slowly, imperceptibly. Not in one night or even 1 year. These mounds could take generations to complete. One archaeologist once joked that Cahokians built with more patience than pharaohs. You sit on a stump and just watch. The sun sinks low. The air glows orange. A girl walks by and hands you a flat cake made of corn and berries. You don't ask what's in it. You just bite and nod, and she smiles like you passed a test. Somewhere a dog barks. Or maybe it's a coyote. You don't look too hard. Historians still argue whether Cahokia's rapid urbanization was spontaneous or orchestrated. Was there a charismatic leader, a prehistoric Steve Jobs convincing people that the future was here? Or was it more collective, the result of trade routes, climate shifts, and shared ritual dreams? No written records survive. So the city keeps its secrets. but the scale speaks volumes. 40,000 people. Over 100 earthen mounds. Organized labor, food surplus, religious ceremony. Cahokia wasn't a fluke. It was a force. And as you lie back on a mossy patch of ground, watching the smoke spiral into dusk, you start to feel its rhythm. Not fast. Not loud. Just steady. Like a heartbeat under soil. This city wasn't waiting to be discovered. It was always here. The drumbeat fades, but your footsteps pick up where it left off. You head toward one of the mid-sized mounds now, lower than Monk's Mound but still impressive. This one is rectangular, maybe 20 feet high, with gentle sides that almost seem designed for walking. A narrow trail winds to the top, but you pause, noticing the layers of colored soil visible along the edges where rain has eroded a thin slice. Brown, red, tan, gray, each a different source, a different era. Each a quiet signature from the hands that placed it. It's not just dirt. It's meaning. Layered, symbolic, persistent. You stand still and think about the sheer labor this took. No iron tools. No beasts of burden. Just baskets. And will. Basket after basket, hauled on shoulders, dumped and leveled. Some mounds were built over centuries. Others seem to have appeared practically overnight. Evidence, perhaps, of a grand event or urgent religious need. You begin to climb. At the top, there's a flat surface the size of a basketball court. Nothing remains but packed earth and a few broken pottery shards lying half-buried. But long ago this platform may have held a temple or a chief's residence, or even a celestial observatory. From here the view is clearer than you'd expect. The city sprawls gently in all directions. The river glimmers like a sleeping serpent. The surrounding forests stretch toward the horizon, broken only by scattered trails and the ghostly silhouettes of more mounds. To your right, something catches the sunlight. You squint. It's a pattern, a ring of wooden posts, each about the height of a person, standing in a perfect circle. Some lean a little. Some are missing entirely. But the shape is unmistakable. You're looking at Woodhenge. Yes, it sounds like a discount brand of furniture, but it's more than that. Like its cousin across the Atlantic, Cahokia's Woodhenge was a solar calendar, tracking the movement of the sun throughout the year. From the central post, on key days, equinox, solstice, the sun would rise or set precisely between specific poles. A prehistoric observatory, built from tree trunks and mathematics. Historians still argue whether it was purely astronomical or tied to ritual feasts, sacrifices, or ceremonies involving fertility and corn. Probably all of the above. You head down toward it now, feeling the ground soften with each step. As you approach the circle, the scale comes into focus. Each pole is thick, about the width of a grown man's chest, and evenly spaced. You try standing in the center. Suddenly, the geometry makes sense. Imagine, it's the spring equinox. The community has gathered. Smoke hangs in the air. Drums echo through the trees. The chief priest steps to the center, his arms raised. As the sun rises, it fits perfectly between two posts on the eastern arc. A murmur ripples through the crowd. It worked. The gods are listening. Cahokia didn't have clocks, but it had timekeepers. And the calendar wasn't for vanity, it was survival. Planting too early could mean crop failure. Harvesting too late could mean starvation. Knowing the skies meant knowing the future. You touch one of the poles. It's cool, weathered, maybe a replica placed by modern archaeologists, but the sensation is real. Smooth here, rough there. Bark long gone. Memory and timber. Behind you, someone calls out. You turn expecting a guide or a villager. But it's just the wind. As you move back toward the center of Cahokia, you begin to understand that the mounds weren't random. They were built according to a cosmological blueprint. The city itself was a map of the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. Some scholars suggest the layout reflected the three sacred worlds, the upper, sky, the middle, earth, and the lower, spirits beneath. Mounds aligned with celestial events. plazas represented transitions between realms, and rivers and causeways acted as arteries, linking life to the divine. You look up at the darkening sky. Stars are beginning to peek through. No skyscrapers block your view. Just sky. Endless, open, quiet. You wonder, what would this have looked like 1,000 years ago? Before light pollution? When the Milky Way stretched from one horizon to the other like a spilled necklace of pearls. No wonder they worshipped the stars. They were everywhere. And no wonder they built mounds so tall. The higher you climb, the closer you get to the mystery. You pass a man kneeling beside a fire, rubbing crushed pigment onto a wooden flute. He hums a slow tune. You don't understand the words, but you catch the rhythm. There is a pattern here. Not just in the stars or the posts or the mounds, but in the lives people lived. Rhythms of planting and waiting. Rhythms of drum and silence. Rhythms of rising and falling. Cahokia was a city built on those pulses. And perhaps, in some quiet way, it still is. The sky above Cahokia has deepened into a velvety purple, the kind of dusk that seems to muffle sound and slow down time. You stroll through a quieter neighborhood now, away from the central plazas and ceremonial spaces. This is where daily life unfolds, not in grand rituals or mountaintop speeches, but in the quiet clatter of pots and the rustle of grass mats being unrolled for sleep. You duck under a low wooden arch and step into one of the residential courtyards. A circle of homes surrounds a shared space where smoke rises from a small fire. Children's laughter drifts in and out of earshot, followed by a warning voice, a mother reminding her son not to eat raw squash again. The homes are low, oval or rectangular, made from wattle and daub. You run your fingers gently along one wall. It's warm to the touch, sun-baked clay reinforced with river reeds, maybe even buffalo hair. The roof is thatched with prairie grass. Rain would have clattered loudly against it, a kind of ancient white noise. Inside one of the homes you peek without stepping in. A woman is spreading a soft paste of cornmeal onto a stone slab, forming thin cakes with gentle slaps of her hand. A toddler plays with a carved stick beside her, poking the dirt as if digging for secrets. The interior is dim but tidy. Bundles hang from the rafters. Herbs, corn cobs, small bags that probably hold seeds or amulets. Clay bowls sit neatly along the back wall. A woven sleeping mat takes up most of the floor space. It looks just uncomfortable enough to be historically accurate. In Cahokia you realize comfort was probably measured differently. Not by thread counts or pillow fluffiness, but by familiarity. By warmth. By the presence of your people around you. A man sits nearby, fletching arrows with goose feathers. He works with a kind of meditative focus, pausing only to inspect each point for flaws. You wonder what he's hunting, deer, perhaps, or waterfowl from the wetlands to the east. There's no sign of furniture. No chairs, no tables. But there is structure. Every object has its place. Every movement has its purpose. These homes are alive, not with noise, but with rhythm. You hear a gentle bell chime, not metal, but perhaps a clay rattle hung by the door. It shifts in the breeze, a soft, hollow sound. The kind of sound you could fall asleep to. You continue walking, your path now lit by glowing fires tucked behind cane screens. Along the trail, women carry bundles of sweetgrass, leaving a faint herbal scent in the air. You pass a row of what look like clay ovens, small dome structures with dark mouths and the scent of char still lingering. Bread? Smoked meat? Roasted squash? It's hard to say, but your stomach growls either way. One of the kids eyes you suspiciously, then bursts out laughing as his younger brother tries to scare you with a frog. You pretend to be terrified. It seems to make their evening. Historians still debate how egalitarian Cahokia's society truly was. Was wealth visibly displayed? Did some live far more comfortably than others? Or was the balance of labor and status distributed more communally than in the class-ridden cities of Europe? Evidence exists for both theories. Modest homes nestled near massive ceremonial mounds, yet also artifacts of prestige and luxury tucked into ordinary dwellings. Maybe Cahokia allowed for status, but without needing marble statues or gold-plated chariots to prove it. A little further down you pass a garden plot. It's late in the growing season, but rows of corn stalks still sway like sleepy sentinels. Beneath them beans snake around the stems. And in between squat orange squash nestle low to the ground. The three sisters, corn, beans and squash, grown together in harmony, each feeding the others. You kneel and brush your hand along the soil. It's rich, dark, full of life. It's no wonder Cahokia thrived here. The land itself was generous. Then a surprising scent catches your attention, something like lavender but sharper, astringent. You follow your nose to a small lean-to where bundles of dried herbs hang from wooden racks. A woman sits nearby, grinding roots with a stone pestle. She doesn't speak, but she nods politely as you approach. Healing plants. Medicine. Maybe for fevers, for toothaches, for calming troubled sleep. You'd ask for a dose, but you're already drifting just from the smell. Somewhere nearby, a baby begins to cry. Then stop. Then cry again softer. And a lullaby begins, not in English, not in any language you know, but with a tune that feels older than words. It repeats, slows, fades, and still Cahokia lives around you. This isn't a lost city. Not here, not now. You look back at the quiet homes, the flickering firelight, the shadows dancing against walls of earth and cane. You hear a snore, a soft sigh, the sound of wooden flutes somewhere far away, barely audible over the rustling trees. The city isn't performing now. It's resting. So are you. You wake. Well, not quite wake, but stir, as a change in the air brushes your skin. The scent of dawn? No, it's still deep night. But something is different. The stillness has shifted, like a breath being held. You rise, your feet soft on packed earth, and follow the sound of voices, not loud, not urgent, but focused. You're at the edge of Cahokia's main plaza again, though now it's transformed. The fires have dimmed to glowing embers. A few torches flicker on long poles. And scattered across the open space are stalls, mats and bundles. It's market time. Yes, even in the dark, even before sunrise. Cahokians, it seems, were early risers. Or maybe they just never slept long. You move among the stalls. Most aren't stalls in the modern sense. Just woven mats spread across the dirt, loaded with goods. Fish, clay jars, woven baskets, turtle shells, and brilliant beads. You crouch beside one woman who's arranging bone tools with careful precision. Her goods are simple, practical. Awls, needles, fish hooks. Her fingers are rough, her movements graceful. Next to her, a younger trader offers something flashier. Dyed feathers tied in bundles, bits of polished copper, stones that shimmer green in the firelight. One long blade, black and glinting, catches your eye. Obsidian. Volcanic glass. Razor sharp, beautiful, and definitely not local. That's when it hits you. These are not just local crafts. These are imports. Cahokia, perched in the Mississippi Valley, was connected, by river, by trade, by rumor, to places hundreds, even thousands of miles away. You see Gulf Coast shells carved into amulets. Bear claws from the Rockies. Mica from the Appalachian Mountains. Tobacco from the Southeast. Even rumors, passed person to person, of turquoise from the desert and cacao beans from deep in Mesoamerica. Historians still debate the exact scope of Cahokia's trade network. But no one denies that it was vast. And not just goods traveled, ideas too. Fashion. News. You run your fingers over a row of beads, small, round, blue-gray. They feel smooth, almost metallic. A trader smiles and tells you in a voice half joking that these are rain collar stones. You don't believe him, but you still want to buy one. A few stalls over, a young girl holds out a bowl of something steaming. You peer in, it's some kind of soup. Floating in the broth are corn kernels, chunks of squash, and a dark green herb that smells both spicy and calming. She gestures, try it. You sip. It's earthy, warm, unexpectedly sweet. You thank her with a nod. She grins, revealing teeth stained faintly from chewing something. Probably red willow bark, a kind of ancient chewing gum and mild stimulant. You pass a group of men discussing, arguing, over the shape of a ceremonial pipe. One is carved to resemble a heron. Another, a human figure with enormous eyes and swirling markings. You're not sure if this is business or philosophy. Either way, it's passionate. Cahokia's market is not just about survival. It's about expression. You see songs being traded for pottery. Feathers swapped for stories. Laughter shared like currency. And here's the surprising part. There's very little hierarchy on display. You don't see anyone lording over the others. No guards, no money changers, no overseers enforcing prices. It's not that everyone is equal. There were clearly elites in Cahokia, but the marketplace feels fluid, dynamic, human. You watch two women trade silently, exchanging only glances and small nods. They've likely done this for years. No words needed. The objects speak for themselves. Nearby, a man carefully unwraps a bundle to reveal a small clay figure, half a foot tall, delicate, beautifully made. It's a woman with exaggerated hips and a proud stance. A fertility symbol? A deity? A representation of someone real? No one knows for sure. Archaeologists have found hundreds of similar figurines, but their meaning remains elusive. Historians still argue whether they were idols, toys, or something in between. You lean in closer, noticing the detail, the tiny pattern of her braids, the etching on her necklace. This is no rush job. Someone poured time and reverence into this. And just beyond the circle of traders, you spot a long wooden rack holding musical instruments. Rattles, flutes, drums, even a kind of stringed bow that hums when plucked. A man strums one absent-mindedly. The sound is gentle, lilting like wind through reeds. Another trader offers you a folded cloth. You open it to reveal a set of colorful stones arranged in an intricate pattern. Maybe a game, maybe a message, maybe just a gift for the eyes. You ask what it is. She shrugs and says, "You tell me," and laughs. This is what Cahokia offers. Not certainty, but presence. Not answers, but invitations. The marketplace begins to quiet again. People gather their goods, pack their bundles, and disappear down trails like smoke curling back into the trees. A trader picks up a bowl of soup left on the ground and slurps it contentedly. No one seems to mind. You're left standing in the soft morning light, holding your little rain caller bead. Maybe it does call rain. Maybe it doesn't. But tonight, in the heart of a forgotten city, it called something. The bead still rests in your palm as you walk, smooth, warm from your touch, a kind of accidental talisman. Behind you, the marketplace dissolves into the early morning mist. But ahead, something else emerges. A wide, flat area just past the edge of the main plaza, bordered by a loose circle of towering wooden posts. You've arrived at Woodhenge. Yes, we mentioned it before, but now you're in the middle of it, truly inside. The scale hits you differently when you stand among the timbers. Each post rises straight and tall, weathered by centuries, though some are modern reconstructions. Still, the feeling is real. You're surrounded by time. The silence inside the circle is heavier, almost sacred. It's not just that the structure aligns with the sun, it measures it. At solstice and equinox, the sunrise would pierce through specific gaps between the posts, casting long shadows across the ground, marking time in light and stillness. You step into the center, the place where the high priest or astronomer once stood. You look to the east, and even now, without ceremony, without audience, you can feel the geometry settle into place. Cahokia didn't just live in time. It watched it, tracked it, predicted it. Historians still argue whether Woodhenge was used solely for agricultural planning or whether it was the site of seasonal festivals, performances, or fertility rites. Some even suggest it was a way of binding cosmic order to political authority. If you could command the seasons, you could command the people. You slowly walk the circle's perimeter. The posts creak faintly in the wind. Birds flutter between them, occasionally perching like tiny feathered guardians. In the dirt at your feet, faint traces of older post holes remain, rings within rings marking older versions of Woodhenge. Each rebuilt slightly differently, suggesting evolving purposes over time. It was never static, never finished. Cahokia was always adjusting, just like the sky. From the outer edge, you spot several children watching from a distance, mimicking your steps and pretending to read the stars. One of them stumbles and bursts into laughter. You wave. They disappear into the trees. Not far away, another structure draws your attention. A low mound topped with a wooden platform and what looks like a canopy of woven reeds. A few figures sit quietly inside, one playing a slow tune on a hollowed gourd instrument. Another is painting a design onto a large wooden disc, spirals, arrows, sun motifs. You can't tell if this is a calendar, a game board, or some cosmic diagram. Maybe all three. Cahokia was layered like that. Things served multiple purposes. A mound could be a tomb, a stage, a symbol. A circle of poles could track the heavens and host a dance. You pass a group of elders now, their faces painted in quiet earth tones. They sit cross-legged near a fire, heads bowed in what might be prayer, or maybe just sleepy conversation. One of them looks up at you and grins. "You missed sunrise," he says in a language you feel but don't fully understand. You nod. "Maybe next time." They chuckle and one reaches into a pouch, offering you a pinch of something, dried tobacco perhaps or crushed leaf. You mimic their motions and gently sprinkle it onto the fire. The smoke curls upward, slow and fragrant, tracing a lazy spiral toward the sky. Even now, Cahokia structures are whispering, through alignment, through architecture, through ash. You step back into the open field where Woodhenge once cast long equinox shadows. Without warning, a breeze sweeps across the grass. The tall posts sway slightly. Not enough to creak, just enough to hum. And suddenly you see it, not with your eyes but with your spine. The alignment, the purpose. You imagine the sunrise piercing the circle, igniting the post tips like firebrands. The hush of hundreds of gathered people, the hush before the chant, before the signal to plant or harvest or pray. You're standing in an observatory, yes, but also in a theater, a temple, a classroom. There's something humbling in that realization, that ancient people, long before telescopes or timepieces, could read the skies with this much clarity, could create architecture that moved with the cosmos, could stand exactly where you now stand, waiting for the first beam of morning light to thread between posts and crown the priest in gold. You take a final walk around the ring. A few scattered feathers lie at your feet, turkey, maybe hawk. Offerings? Decorations? You don't touch them. You just breathe. Because here, inside this circle of wood and memory, the air feels like a page between stories, ready to turn if you're quiet enough. You leave the quiet circle of Woodhenge behind, its posts still upright like watchful elders, and follow a gentle path leading toward the central mounds once again. This time, you approach not as a curious wanderer, but as someone beginning to understand that Cahokia was more than a city. Was an idea. A system. A performance of belief, ritual, and rule, all choreographed with care. Ahead of you rises another prominent mound, not as tall as Monk's Mound, but formidable in its own right. At its summit, you see shadows moving, the flicker of firelight, and a low rhythmic chant that rides the wind like the slow roll of thunder. You climb slowly, your steps sinking slightly into the earth-packed slope. The mound feels different underfoot, denser, older. The air smells of cedar smoke and river water. At the top, the space opens into a wide platform. A structure sits near the edge, a wooden building, rectangular and elevated slightly on stilts. It's simple, with woven walls and an open doorway facing the sunrise. This is not a home. It's something else. You've arrived at a place of power. This mound may have hosted the great temple of Cahokia, or the residence of its principal chief. Historians still argue whether Cahokia was ruled by a single hereditary leader or a more complex council of elders and priests. But one thing is certain. Someone or some group held authority here. You hear footsteps and turn to see several figures ascending behind you. They carry bundles, long reed pipes, ceramic jars, painted masks. One woman carries a feathered staff, its colors faded but still striking. You step back respectfully. The group enters the structure and disappears from view. A few minutes later, the air thickens with the scent of burning herbs. You hear a rattle, slow, deliberate, then chanting. Low, steady, like a heartbeat formed from breath and fire. This is not for show. This is how Cahokia ruled, not through force but through ritual, through spectacle. Priests were not just spiritual leaders. They were timekeepers, astronomers, mediators. The connection between the sacred and the political was seamless. To question one was to question both. From this platform, ceremonies would be conducted to bless the harvest, to mourn the dead, to usher in the new moon, or to mark the passage of a comet. You sit quietly at the edge of the mound, watching torchlight dance in the structure's doorway. You wonder what stories have unfolded here, what declarations, what bargains with the gods. And then you smell it, tobacco. But not the modern kind. This is strong, earthy, almost sweet. It was called Nicotiana rustica, a strain far more potent than today's varieties. Used in rituals, in negotiation and sacrifice. Not always smoked, sometimes chewed, sometimes offered whole to fire or river. You imagine a ceremony, a chief wrapped in dyed cloth, his face painted with red ochre, addressing a crowd gathered below. Smoke curling upward. Silence broken only by a drumbeat or the wail of a bone whistle. It's theater. But it's also real. From this height, Cahokia spreads out like a living map. You can see the pattern now, the layout of mounds and plazas, the water channels, the ring of homes like beads on a necklace. You remember the market, the gardens, the rhythm of daily life below. And yet here, above it all, the city feels different, less physical, more symbolic. You spot something off to the west, a low mound almost hidden among trees. A burial mound, perhaps. Or a mound not yet studied. Cahokia still holds secrets beneath its soil. Historians debate the relationship between the sacred and the ordinary in this city. Was every mound a message? Was every ceremony political? Or did people just want a moment of wonder? A sunrise in alignment? A priest's voice echoing off the sky? You lean back against the cool earth and exhale. Power in Cahokia was not etched in stone or codified in parchment. It was performed. It was remembered. It was handed down through gesture, shadow, breath. A young boy appears at the edge of the mound, carrying a bundle of kindling. He nods at you and adds the wood to a nearby fire pit, which crackles with renewed life. The light flickers on your arms, warm, golden. He doesn't speak, but he doesn't need to. This is how stories are shared here, not in words but in firelight and footsteps. In rituals carried out under stars that haven't moved in 1,000 years. The boy leaves. The fire settles. The chanting fades. And you are left once again with silence, perched between earth and sky, on a mound built with millions of hands and held together by memory. You descend the mound quietly, careful with each step, as if not to disturb whatever invisible energy still hums through its core. Behind you, the ceremonial structure darkens, its torches snuffed out one by one. Below, the city of Cahokia stirs, early risers beginning their day, smoke curling lazily from morning fires, and the soft bleat of a goat, or perhaps a deer-like creature, calling out from a nearby pen. You walk toward a broad path that splits the settlement like a spine. It's more than a trail. Feels intentional. Wide enough to accommodate processions or festivals or perhaps something far older, migration. As you walk, you can't help but feel the buzz of something about to begin. Or maybe something that already began long ago. Cahokia wasn't always here. In fact, for most of human history on this continent, this land was forest and river and marsh. A home for hunter-gatherers, seasonal travelers, small clusters of people who built nothing permanent. Then, quite suddenly, around the year 1050, everything changed. The population exploded. Villages sprang up seemingly overnight. Mounds began to rise. Trade routes deepened. Ceremonies grew larger. And this city, became the spiritual and political heart of a vast region stretching from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. Historians still argue whether this Cahokia boom was caused by climate shifts, surplus corn, a charismatic leader, or pure momentum. But whatever the cause, its speed is breathtaking. One moment, there's a scattering of modest hamlets. The next, a metropolis with urban planning, monumental architecture, and religious influence that radiated like a drumbeat across 1,000 miles. You pause at a raised wooden platform beside the road. Several baskets are piled high with dried squash and shelled corn. An older man carefully inspects each one, muttering softly as he checks for mold or rot. Behind him, clay jars filled with beans stand in tidy rows, sealed with clay stoppers and bits of leather. Food storage. Not just for today or tomorrow, but for months, maybe years. This was how cities grew. Not through gold or conquest, but through calories. Corn was power. Corn was possibility. And Cahokia had a lot of it. As you walk past, the old man gestures to a nearby field, fallow now but marked by ancient planting rows. This land, he says, feeds people we haven't met yet. Then he chuckles and turns back to his baskets. You continue on thinking about that boom, how suddenly this place became a magnet. What drew people here? Was it the mounds? The ceremonies? The promise of food and safety? Or something harder to name, something magnetic in the soul? You pass a long row of houses, each smaller than the last. Families sit outside repairing nets or carving paddles. The scent of river fish and ash hangs in the air. There's movement everywhere, orderly, rhythmic, like the city breathes through its people. Not all were born here. You hear accents, see unfamiliar tattoos, and glimpse jewelry styles you don't recognize. These people came from far-off places, tribes and regions with their own customs. And yet here they are, side by side, farming the same soil, praying at the same mounds, laughing in the same language. Cahokia didn't just grow. It absorbed. It adapted. You watch as a young girl trades a clay bowl to a man wearing a robe dyed deep red. In return, she receives a handful of feathers. Not local, you think. They shimmer faintly in the sun. Maybe from the tropics. This is how culture spreads. Silently. Joyfully. One bowl, one feather at a time. And you can't help but wonder, was Cahokia an empire? A capital? Or something else entirely? A kind of sacred magnet that pulled in pilgrims, traders, and wanderers, then wove them into its rhythm? The theories vary. Some say it was the charisma of its elite. Others suggest a unifying religion. Still others believe it was simply in the right place at the right time, a cultural crossroads with a surplus of food and a shortage of borders. But whatever the reason, it happened. And it left behind evidence. You turn a corner and stumble into a small plaza. At its center, a tall wooden pole rises into the sky, painted with spirals and bird motifs. Around it, several youths perform a dance, clapping, stepping in unison, then breaking apart like starlings before reforming again. A mother watches, arms crossed, smiling proudly. You nod toward her. What are they dancing? She shrugs, amused. Whatever they want. It's a new dance. Then, almost conspiratorially, she adds, everything here is new. Even the old things. And suddenly you get it. Cahokia wasn't built on tradition alone. It was built on reinvention. Its boom wasn't just a population surge. It was an explosion of possibility. The kind that says we can build mounds. We can track stars. We can feed thousands. We can imagine a new way of living and make it real. The dance ends. Laughter erupts. Someone throws a carved stick like a javelin. It lands with a thunk in the dust. And just like that, Cahokia booms again, this time in sound. By now, your legs are a little dusty, your shoulders lightly kissed by sun, and the scent of river mud clings faintly to your skin. Cahokia is fully awake. The city pulses with footsteps and firewood, with whispered trading and distant flute tunes. But as you continue your walk beyond the main plaza, the familiar gives way to the foreign. You're heading toward the outskirts, the city's edge, if such a thing exists in a place that constantly shifts and flows like its river. And here, something unexpected emerges, accents you don't recognize, tools made in styles that don't match local patterns, clothing dyed in hues uncommon here, crimson, turquoise, ochre, deep indigo. You've arrived at the place where strangers come and stay. Travelers from far-flung places. The Great Lakes, the Gulf Coast, the deserts of the Southwest, even perhaps the distant plains of what's now Mexico. Some are visiting. Some are trading. Some may never leave again. Historians still debate how deeply Cahokia was tied to other distant cultures. Were these people emissaries? Refugees? Pilgrims? Or just opportunistic traders following corn and commerce? You pass a man carving obsidian, his hands quick and deliberate. Obsidian isn't native to this region. It comes from volcanic zones hundreds of miles away. Yet here he is in a city of mounds and corn, making a blade sharp enough to split a hair. He notices you watching and holds up the blade with a grin. To cut lies, he says. You're not sure if he's joking. Nearby, a woman weaves something intricate. Fine reeds loop through her fingers into a tight spiral mat. On her arm you spot a pattern tattooed in tiny dots. It's unfamiliar. You point gently. Water, she says, then smiles. Where I'm from, water doesn't flow the way it does here. Cahokia was not an isolated world. It was a hub. A swirling center of stories. Further down, you approach a cooking fire that smells nothing like the maize-heavy scent you've come to expect. It's tangier, smoky in a different way. The cook, a wiry man with pierced cheeks, hands you a small bowl. Inside, roasted beans, bitter greens, and something spicy enough to wake the dead. Your nose runs. He laughs. Desert pepper, he says. From where the sun breaks rocks. You sip water from a nearby gourd and feel the burn fade. The heat lingers in your chest, like a reminder that Cahokia wasn't built by one people alone. It was shaped by arrival. The locals, no doubt, laid the foundation, the mounds, the temples, the time-marking poles. But the details, the flavors, the sounds, those came from everywhere. Canoes from distant river systems. Stories carried across trails and forest paths. Languages bumping into each other, blending at the edges. You hear two children squabbling in a mixture of tongues. One scolds the other using words that don't match the dialect you've been hearing all day. A parent steps in and the tone shifts again. Even in play, the city's identity is layered. You follow a group of visitors touring the ceremonial mounds. One carries a gourd rattle painted with unfamiliar patterns, sunburst and jaguar. Another wears feathers from tropical birds not native to the temperate valleys of the Mississippi. The colors pop against the soft green of the trees. Historians still debate just how far Cahokia's influence spread. Was it political clout? Spiritual prestige? The sheer magnetism of a city that had somehow married sacred geometry with reliable crop yields? But whatever the reason, people came. One elder explains that traders often brought more than goods. They brought myths. You sit beside him as he draws a shape in the dirt, a spiral coiled tightly, then flaring outward. This, he says, is how stories travel. He traces it again. And this, he adds with a wink, is how we grow. You find yourself thinking of Cahokia as less of a city and more of a spiral. Expanding outward through trade, contracting inward through ritual. Every new visitor brought something, an object, a belief, a tale. Some returned home, their lives shifted by what they'd seen. Others stayed, folded into the rhythm. Even the architecture shows traces of other worlds. A roof slant here suggests a southwestern design. A weaving pattern there echoes lakeside tribes. A ceramic motif looks suspiciously Mesoamerican. Nothing was static. Even the sacred was open to influence. You pause beside a small garden patch filled with plants you don't recognize. Not corn. Not squash. Something else, foreign herbs, perhaps. Brought by someone who missed the flavor of home. The garden's caretaker is an older woman with sharp eyes and a soft voice. Seeds travel, she tells you, brushing dirt from her palms. Just like people. But they don't always grow the same way. Sometimes they change. Sometimes you do. You nod, unsure if she's talking about gardening anymore. As the sun dips lower in the sky, the sounds of Cahokia soften. You hear a flute again. This one different, higher-pitched, almost bird-like. Perhaps another imported gift, now made local. And as the shadows grow longer, you realize that Cahokia wasn't just built by travelers. It was built for them. A city always in flux. A place designed to receive, reshape, and remember. You look down at the bead still in your hand. It's smoother now. The sun now angles low in the sky, casting golden light that stretches across the earth like a slow exhale. Shadows lengthen. Cahokia doesn't slow so much as it shifts. The rhythm of the day begins to fade, replaced by the quieter pulse of evening preparation. You follow a winding path that leads not to mounds or temples, but to something much stranger, an open, flat field bordered by low posts. At one end stands a group of onlookers, chatting softly, some with food in hand. Others lean on carved staffs or chew roots thoughtfully. There's laughter, murmured bets, teasing. And in the center, a small stone disc sits on the ground. You've arrived at a chunky court. It sounds like the name of an off-brand candy bar, but chunky was Cahokia's game of choice. Played for sport, for ceremony, for something that maybe walked the line between both. Two players stand poised, holding long spears. One kneels beside the disc. It's round, about the size of a large grapefruit, polished and flattened on both sides, with a shallow groove running around its edge. You're told it's made of granite, heavy, satisfying. Without warning, the player spins the disc. It rolls forward across the packed dirt, wobbling only slightly, its path curving ever so subtly. The moment it's in motion, the other player steps forward and hurls his spear, aiming not at the disc, but at where he thinks it will be when the spear lands. The disc rolls on. The crowd murmurs. The spear lands, quivering in the ground. Miss. The disc topples. The players switch roles. A slow clap ripples through the audience. Chunky is a game of prediction, of intuition and nerve. It isn't just about hitting a moving target. It's about reading the future. At least, that's what it looks like from the sidelines. Some say the game began as a form of divination, a way to determine outcomes or resolve disputes. Others insist it was always sport, high stakes, high skill, occasionally high drama. In Cahokia, it may have been all of the above. You sit down on a patch of woven grass mat offered by a passing youth. It's surprisingly soft. A woman hands you a gourd of something vaguely citrusy and tells you to watch the hips. Apparently that's how you spot a skilled chunky player. You thank her and pretend you know what you're doing. Historians still argue over chunky's precise origins. Variants existed in the Southwest, in the plains, even deep into Mesoamerica. But in Cahokia, the game had its own prestige. It wasn't just something kids played after chores. It was organized, observed, ritualized. You watch another round begin. This time, one of the players wears a headdress adorned with dyed feathers. Not the everyday kind, ceremonial, striking. His movement is fluid, almost dance-like. The disc spins. The crowd quiets. He throws. The spear lands just beside the disc. So close the stone skips sideways before falling. The crowd erupts in low, respectful cheers. A few spectators wave bundles of dried grass, fanning the air like fans at a tennis match. You turn to the man beside you and ask, "What do they win?" He laughs. Sometimes corn. Sometimes pride. You smile. You've been part of many games in your life. basketball, tag, video games, but none quite like this. Chunky feels ancient but also surprisingly modern. Like it taps into the same competitive energy that drives any sport. Skill, guts, and a little bit of luck. You're told that in some cases the stakes were much higher. Ritual games might have decided the outcome of leadership transitions, the forgiveness of debts, even the fate of marriages. Some stories, possibly exaggerated, possibly not, tell of players who gambled everything, even their lives. Yet here today it feels communal, playful. Not tense, but rich with tradition. You glance down the field and see children mimicking the moves with carved sticks and pretend stones. The next generation already in training. As the match winds down, a small group begins singing on the far side of the court. It's a low melody, wordless, but with a rhythm that matches the pace of the game. Flute players add a soft harmony, and for a moment, it all feels choreographed. The music, the throws, the murmuring audience. One young boy beside you mimics the stone's spin with his hands. He spins, he lunges, he throws an invisible spear. The girl next to him corrects his form. They both laugh. And just like that, the ancient bleeds into the present. You realize something simple but profound. In every great civilization there is always a game. A pastime. Something that brings people together not just to compete but to connect. And in Cahokia that game was chunky. It taught reflexes, sure, but it also taught patience, grace, timing, maybe even faith. You stand as the final round finishes. The players clasp hands and bow slightly toward each other. The crowd begins to disperse. Bits of laughter and gossip trail behind them like the tails of shooting stars. The disc lies motionless in the dirt. It looks like nothing. But somehow it held a whole world. You leave the chunky field behind as dusk begins to settle over Cahokia once more. The city exhales. Smoke rises in ribbons, carrying with it the sense of roasted maize and damp cedar. But tonight, you walk not toward celebration or ceremony. You're headed beneath the surface, into the layers that lie hidden just underfoot. A low mound, not much taller than you, rises ahead. Unlike the towering platforms meant for temples or homes of the elite, this one seems quiet, even solemn. Covered in grass, partially eroded, with a small cluster of posts marking its edges, it's easy to miss. But archaeologists didn't. This is where the city starts to whisper. You descend, not physically but imaginatively, into the ground, into time. Beneath your feet, the past stacks in delicate strata. Not marble ruins or towering stone cathedrals, but bone, pottery, charcoal, pollen. Cahokia built itself up, yes, but it also buried what mattered. Carefully. Intentionally. Archaeological digs here have unearthed mass graves, intricate burial pits, and what appear to be offering deposits. Some are small, single individuals, buried with bone beads and ceremonial shells. Others are vast, chaotic. Rows of young women, bodies arranged shoulder to shoulder, often without accompanying goods. Historians still argue what these mass burials mean. Were they sacrifices? Victims of disease? Honored companions sent to the afterlife with an elite leader? No clear answers. You kneel beside an excavation site, long since covered again but preserved in detailed records. In your mind's eye the earth peels back. There, at the bottom of a deep pit, lies a man surrounded by shell beads arranged in a striking avian shape. Some call him the Birdman. His body is central. Around him, other skeletons, some carefully placed, others jumbled, seem to spiral outward like wings. It's both beautiful and chilling. Was this a hero? A chief? A deity in human form? Theories swirl. Some believe the Birdman was a real person elevated by myth. Others argue he never existed, that the burial itself created the legend. What we do know is this: the burial wasn't casual. It was a statement. A performance of death. You rise and walk slowly along the base of the mound. Small ceramic fragments glint in the grass. You spot the edge of a broken pot, weathered, blackened by fire, its edge etched with simple geometric lines. Cahokia's ceramics tell their own quiet stories. Not lavish or elaborate but often practical, used for cooking, serving, storing. And yet, certain vessels, long-necked bottles with sculpted faces or animal forms, clearly held deeper meaning. They've been found in graves, clustered near the hands or mouths of the deceased. Maybe water for the journey. Maybe something more symbolic, memory preserved in clay. You notice an offering pit marked by a ring of stones. Inside, fragments of burned corn, crushed bone, and what looks like a necklace strung with canine teeth. A tribute? A farewell? A bargain? Nearby, someone sings. The voice is low and untrained but not unsteady. It rises and falls in a pattern that doesn't match modern scales. A young girl, no more than 12, sits cross-legged, rocking slightly, eyes closed. She's singing to the mound. You don't interrupt. Some traditions never left. Even if the words are new, the act is old. Not everything beneath Cahokia's soil is so solemn. Some excavations have uncovered curious objects. Gaming stones, dolls carved from antler, tiny clay effigies of animals. Toys? Charms? Ritual tools? A little of everything, perhaps. What makes Cahokia's buried layers so compelling is how human they are. These weren't anonymous ruins, these were lives. Loves. Losses. Whole families once sat where you now stand, telling jokes, grieving quietly, celebrating a child's first steps, or a grandmother's final breath. And here they remain, not in spirit necessarily but in matter. In impressions. In the curve of a pot, the layout of a grave, the placement of a shell bead against a ribcage. You sit beside a low ridge that marks the corner of an ancient cemetery. Grass grows tall here and a few wildflowers peek through. Fireflies begin their slow ascent, blinking like cautious thoughts. One lights on your hand. The idea of sacred ground isn't always marked by gates or signs. Sometimes it's just felt. You feel it now, not dread, not sadness, but reverence. As though the very soil remembers being touched, held, wept into. Historians still struggle to interpret Cahokia's mortuary practices because they resist easy categories. They're not purely religious, not purely political, not purely domestic. They're all of those things tangled and layered like the city itself. And yet, for all its grandeur above ground, it is here, beneath your feet, that Cahokia speaks in its most intimate voice. The voice of a girl buried with her doll. A warrior laid to rest beside his dog. A priest wrapped in feathers. A child whose bones were never meant to be disturbed. The city is quiet now, but it is not silent. As you rise from the edge of the burial mound, the air carries a new chill, one that seems to echo through time. You wrap your arms around yourself, not from cold exactly, but from the heaviness that follows silence. You've seen the energy of Cahokia, its ritual, its rhythm. But now you begin to sense the unraveling. Because, of course, Cahokia did not last. You leave the graves behind and follow a winding trail that cuts through what remains of a residential area. It looks the same as the others. Low homes, half-sunken fire pits, garden beds filled with nothing but stubborn grass. But something's different. It's too quiet. The wood smoke is gone. The footsteps are gone. This is abandonment. And not the kind that happens over a weekend. This was slow, uneven, mysterious. Historians still argue over why Cahokia fell. Theories abound: environmental collapse, political upheaval, warfare, disease, religious fracturing, or even just a slow, inevitable shift in regional priorities. You stop beside what must have once been a thriving family compound. There are still remnants, wattle walls, smooth patches of clay floor, even a cracked cooking stone. But vines curl over what's left. A tree sprouts from the corner of what used to be a bedroom. The collapse was not neat. Some homes were abandoned while others next door remained occupied. Some mounds still hosted ceremonies even as nearby neighborhoods emptied. It wasn't a single catastrophe. It was more like erosion, quiet, persistent, merciless. You pass a waterway now, once a managed channel for drinking, bathing, maybe even small transport. Now it's clogged with silt. Dragonflies dance above it like they don't know it ever mattered. You crouch and scoop a handful of the muddy water. It's thick, brown, ancient. The kind that remembers. Back in the city's heyday, Cahokia would have depended heavily on such waterways. For transport, irrigation, ritual cleansing. But what happens when the river changes course? Or floods too often? Or dries? Some scientists believe that climate shifts, droughts, sudden floods, erratic temperatures, contributed to the unraveling. Crops may have failed. Fishing may have grown scarce. Disease may have found easier footing. But nature rarely acts alone. You come across a broken fence post, weathered, half-rotted. Nearby, a pile of broken pottery. Too many shards to be accidental. Someone smashed these intentionally. What? A ritual ending? A rushed departure? A rejection? The signs suggest a society under stress. Burials become hurried. Trash pits overflow. Homes are rebuilt smaller, more temporary. Ornamentation vanishes. The people who once built celestial calendars and feathered headdresses begin to pare things down to essentials. Fire, shelter, food, survival. Even the sacred begins to fray. Woodhenge, once maintained with obsessive care, falls out of alignment. Posts rot and aren't replaced. The sunrise no longer lines up. The rituals feel off. Maybe the gods stopped speaking. Or maybe the people stopped listening. You pause under the remains of a meeting shelter. The roof is long gone, but you can still see the arrangement of posts in the earth. Circles, half-circles, radiating lines. A place for councils. For decisions. Imagine the debates here. Do we stay? Do we fight? Do we follow the old ways or leave them behind? You sit among the ghost posts and realize something profound. Cahokia didn't just die. It dismantled itself. Slowly. Reluctantly. Confusedly. Some people stayed. Others left. But the city that once boomed with clarity and purpose began to echo instead. You keep walking toward the outer edges. The density thins. The mounds grow smaller, more eroded. The city feels like it's exhaling its last breath, not in agony but in weary retreat. You stop at a wide open field. It was once a farming area, maybe even a ceremonial procession ground. Now it's just grass. A breeze moves across it like a hand smoothing wrinkles. One last structure stands to your left. A wooden wall reconstructed by modern historians. It's a palisade or a section of one. Evidence suggests Cahokia built a wall late in its life, enclosing its core with sharpened timbers. Was it defense? Or desperation? Historians debate whether the wall was to keep enemies out, or to keep uncertainty in. Because cities, like people, often sense their own unraveling. They shore up. They simplify. They guard their centers. But sometimes even that isn't enough. You trace your hand along the wood, your fingers catching on splinters. It's not the original timber, of course, but the placement is accurate. You imagine the sound it once made in the wind. The way it must have creaked at night. Eventually even the wall gave way. Not to war as far as we can tell, but to time. By the 1300s, Cahokia had faded. Not disappeared entirely, some people likely remained. But the city's voice had softened to a whisper. The great mounds, once crowned with ceremony, were reclaimed by grass and trees. The marketplaces emptied. The smoke stopped rising. And the rest of the world forgot. You stand there now, in the long evening light, among the ruins of a civilization that never really ended. Just changed. Its people didn't vanish. They moved. They became part of other communities, other stories. They carried with them memories of stars and stone discs, of mounds and maze, of music that kept time with the wind. Cahokia wasn't lost. It was lived. You stand at the edge of an empty field. The sky above Cahokia is now soft with twilight, and for a moment, everything feels utterly still. But this quiet patch of grass under your feet is deceiving. Because you're not just standing on land. You're standing on history. 1,000 years ago, this field was alive, with voices, fires, ceremony, maybe even laughter. Now it's flat, green, uneventful. To the average passerby, it's just another patch of Midwestern earth. But beneath the topsoil, the past sleeps. Cahokia's decline didn't erase its footprint, it just covered it in calm. The mounds remained. The city plan remained. But so much of it was forgotten, swallowed up by cornfields and cattle pastures, forgotten by maps and minds alike. And yet you feel it as you walk. There, the slight rise in the terrain, that used to be a small mound. Over there, where the wildflowers grow. That was likely a storage pit or garden. You stop and imagine a woman kneeling in the dirt, planting beans with rhythmic care, pressing seeds into rich soil while children chase each other between rows. Gone. But not erased. For centuries, settlers plowed this land, unaware that their steel tools were cutting through ancient roads and ceremonial avenues. They turned over pottery shards without curiosity. They found bones and thought only of animals. Cahokia became a footnote. An odd hill here. A funny-shaped ridge there. Even its name was borrowed. Cahokia comes not from the builders, but from a later tribe that moved into the region long after the city was abandoned. The true name of the city? Lost. Perhaps never spoken aloud again. Historians still argue whether this forgetting was deliberate or accidental. Was Cahokia simply too strange to fit into colonial narratives? Or was it easier to ignore than to admit that North America once hosted cities as complex and as powerful as any in the Old World? You pause at a spot where the grass grows taller than usual. Beneath your feet may lie a structure, something domestic or sacred or both. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed entire neighborhoods hiding under this surface, their outlines only visible through the ghost signals of science. You kneel and press your palm to the earth. Cool, soft, so. But it is not empty. Because in the 20th century, slowly, curiously, painstakingly, researchers began to listen again. Archaeologists and anthropologists returned to the site, this time with better tools and, more importantly, better questions. They unearthed not gold but bones and bowls, post holes, fire pits, trash. And in that debris a revelation. This wasn't a village. This wasn't a seasonal camp. This was a city. One of the largest ever built in what is now the United States. A city that had astronomical observatories, sports arenas, international trade, urban planning, religion, art, agriculture. And yet, here you are in a patch of field with no monuments, no signs, just a few interpretive trails and the gentle sound of crickets humming from the edge of the trees. It's strange, isn't it? How something so grand can become invisible. You walk onward, past what once may have been a ceremonial path, now just a gravel trail. You pass a row of young saplings planted by local conservationists. One of them leans sideways, its roots half exposed. It reminds you of Cahokia itself, tilted, buried, trying to find footing in modern soil. Further ahead, you spot a small sign. Nothing flashy, just a simple wooden placard staked into the ground. It reads, "Unmarked mound. Please stay on trail." You pause. Unmarked. As in unnamed. As in unnoticed. You wonder how many cars have driven past this exact spot. How many joggers or dog walkers passed here without realizing they were crossing over generations of memory. How many schools taught about Rome and Athens but forgot the city that once stood right here. Still, the land remembers. If you look closely, you'll see that the grass grows in odd patterns. It thickens over ancient walls. It dips where storage pits once lay. The soil, disturbed 1,000 years ago, has a different texture, just enough to confuse the roots of certain weeds. And at night, when the wind is just right, it whistles across the field with a rhythm that sounds eerily like a flute. You stop walking. Not because you're tired, but because you suddenly understand that this city hasn't disappeared. It's just quiet, waiting. And you realize that even now, beneath your shoes, beneath the grass and clay and hum of insects, Cahokia endures, layered, hidden, watching. You take one step, and then another, and the earth welcomes you back. You walk a little slower now. Not from exhaustion but from something closer to reverence. Each footfall feels like it might echo across centuries. You're retracing steps made long ago by people who never imagined their city would vanish, or be rediscovered. But rediscovered it was. The 19th century rolled in with its plows and railroads, and European-American settlers found themselves living among strange hills. Many believed them to be natural, glacial remnants, perhaps. Others assumed they were burial grounds, but of whom they weren't sure. Some even speculated they were built by a lost race, anything but the ancestors of indigenous people. Because surely a savage couldn't build something so complex. Historians now wince at these early theories, racist, dismissive, and convenient. Still, it took time for science to catch up with curiosity. In the early 1900s, archaeologists finally began serious excavation at Cahokia. They dug trenches, mapped post holes, sifted layers. They cataloged the artifacts, recorded the bones, labeled the mounds. They began to listen. But not everyone wanted to hear. You walk past a reconstructed house now, part of a modern interpretive center. It's tidy, almost too tidy. The walls are straight. The roof is pristine. It's based on evidence, sure, but it still feels slightly removed from the messier, lived-in Cahokia that exists in your imagination. Inside there's a small exhibit showing tools, pottery, and dioramas of Cahokia at its peak. Labels read shell-tempered ceramics, and burial feature 72. It's informative. It's careful. But it's also a little sterile. Outside, the real mounds still rise. You step away from the visitor center and follow a quiet trail behind it. Few people walk this far. The path leads toward a cluster of smaller mounds, some eroded, some overgrown, all overlooked. These are not part of any official tour. Yet as you walk you notice offerings. A bundle of sweetgrass tied with a ribbon. A clay bead placed neatly at the foot of a tree. A feather tucked between two stones. These weren't left by tourists. They're too intentional. Too quiet. Modern native people still come here. To remember. To honor. To remind the land that it is not forgotten. You sit beneath a cottonwood tree and watch the light flicker through its leaves. Somewhere nearby, someone is singing, softly, almost shyly. It's not a performance. It's an offering. In the 1960s and 70s, preservation efforts increased. Monk's Mound was stabilized. Trails were built. Interpretive signs were installed. Cahokia was finally recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1982. Finally, the world said, this mattered. But even then, much of the site was boxed in by highways, billboards, strip malls. You can stand on top of the largest pre-Columbian earthwork in North America and watch semi-trucks roll by on the interstate. Cahokia lives in two worlds now. In one, it is ancient, sacred, whispered about by archaeologists and preserved by descendants. In the other, it is surrounded by gas stations and fast food signs. You sigh, not out of disappointment but from the surreal collision of timelines. The past is never truly past, it just gets new neighbors. Still, there is hope in what remains. Indigenous groups across the Midwest continue to advocate for better preservation, better education, better respect. Some ceremonies have returned, quietly, respectfully. Smoke curls again from fires meant not for tourists but for memory. You pass another mound. This one has no name. But someone has circled it with small river stones. You add one more. Feels right. Historians still argue whether Cahokia should be called a city, or whether that term imposes a modern lens on an ancient way of life. Some prefer chiefdom. Others, ceremonial center. But those are words, labels. What matters is the place, and what it continues to be. You reach a bench set facing Monk's Mound. It's made of weathered wood and someone scratched initials into the side. You sit. You watch the great mound glow gold in the late light. 1,000 years ago, people stood here, maybe not on a bench but close enough, and looked up in awe at what they'd built together. A mountain made of human hands. A staircase to the sky. It still stands. Not because it was indestructible, but because people remembered. And you're here now remembering too. You rise from the bench as the last light begins to dim. The sky above Cahokia is now a deep violet, streaked with soft trails of lingering gold. Monk's Mound looms in silhouette, less a structure now, more a shadow of memory carved into earth and sky. You walk slowly, letting the cool air wrap around you. There's no rush. The city isn't going anywhere. Not really. And you, at this hour, feel like you've become part of its quiet rhythm. There's one place left to visit. You follow a narrow trail, unmarked, lightly worn, toward the largest mound of them all. You've seen it from every angle today, watched it in the morning light, the afternoon heat, and now in this twilight hush. But you haven't stood atop it yet. It's time. Monk's Mound is massive. More than 100 feet tall, longer than a football field, made of layers upon layers of dirt, clay, and willpower. Over 22 million cubic feet of earth were moved, by hand with baskets, to shape it. It took generations, possibly centuries, and still it endures. You begin your ascent. The stairs are modern, but the slope is timeless. Each step brings you higher above the plain, and with each rise the world grows quieter. Your breath deepens. Your thoughts slow. You reach the summit. The wind greets you like an old friend, gentle, cool, curious. From here the world spreads out in every direction. To the east, the river gleams faintly in the dark. To the west, the outlines of other mounds ripple in the half-light. Beyond them, the glow of distant towns, faint reminders of the present. But here at the top you are somewhere else. You try to imagine what it would have looked like 1,000 years ago. The fires, the chants, the stars wheeling overhead without pollution, the people silent, waiting for sunrise, or praying for rain, or listening to the voice of a priest speak between realms. This mound held power, not just physical but symbolic. It was the center, the axis mundi. From here the leaders of Cahokia looked down, not in superiority but in stewardship. The responsibility of holding a city together in a world without roads, without iron, without letters. And still they did it. Historians still debate whether Cahokia had a standing army, whether it was peaceful or warlike, whether its leaders ruled by fear or faith. But here, standing where they once stood, you feel none of that tension. Only reverence. Only awe. You walk slowly across the flattened summit. You touch the railing. You stare into the dark. The city is gone, but it isn't. It's beneath your feet, in the soil, in the subtle curves of the land, in the stories it left behind, and in the stories we tell about it now. Cahokia was never about permanence, not like stone monuments or bronze statues. It was always about rhythm, planting and harvest, sunrise and sunset, life and loss. You sit cross-legged at the edge, your hands resting on your knees. You let your eyes adjust to the dark. And then, slowly, softly, the stars return. Not all at once, but one by one, like a memory being recalled gently. The Big Dipper. Orion. The Milky Way, a silver smudge overhead, just like the people of Cahokia once saw it, when they climbed this same mound with prayers in their chests and drumbeats in their veins. You stay there for a long while, listening. Not for noise, but for memory, for movement, for the soft whisper of a civilization that didn't collapse so much as release. Eventually, even your thoughts begin to settle. There's nothing left to explain, nothing left to uncover. Just a quiet, starlit city beneath your feet, and the realization that even forgotten things can still be sacred. And maybe that's the point, because Cahokia was never truly lost. It's just been waiting. Wind down segment, 300 words. So now you sit in the hush of night, your breath soft, your heartbeat slowing. The earth beneath you holds more than dust. It holds memory layered and quiet, curled up like roots waiting for rain. You've walked through ancient plazas and ghost trails. You've watched flint strike rhythm, and prayers leave lips long turned to soil. You've stepped where children played, where songs were sung into stars, where lives rose and unraveled like river reeds. And now, with the city asleep beneath you, you let the story settle. There's nothing left to chase. Only stillness. Let the last few sounds of Cahokia fade gently, the wind over grass, the rustle of unseen wings in the trees, the hush of your own breath. Imagine yourself resting as if you too were a piece of this place, tucked gently into the landscape. You are safe here. Not as a tourist, not as a historian, but as a witness, a listener. Someone who showed up quietly and stayed long enough to hear what the earth was saying. And in the morning when you leave, the mounds will remain. The trails will soften. The wind will keep its secrets. But somewhere deep inside, something will remember. Something ancient and gentle and true. Good night, traveler. Sleep well.